My name is Laura Neville, and I work at St. Michael's College in Vermont. I'm one of the career education coaches there. And today we're going to be talking about interviewing and professional dress. So just a little bit about me here at St. Mike's. As a career coach, I specialize in areas related to education, human services, government law. So I tend to specialize in these certain career areas like education, human services, government law, and environmental fields, and certain academic departments related to that. But I do work with all students and alumni in different interest areas. And then just personally, I am someone who loves the outdoors. I love sports. I spend as much free time as I can outside. So I really appreciate a lot of what you're doing at the Cystic Fibrosis Lifestyle Foundation. And again, appreciate being here today. So to start out talking about interviewing and professional dress, these are really just two components of a full application process. And anytime you are applying for an opportunity, you have your resume, your cover letter, then maybe you're interviewing and how you're dressing. And this is really a holistic package. And the overall goal is to communicate your value for a specific opportunity. So that might be through writing, it might be verbally, and it might be how you present yourself. We communicate in a lot of different ways, but if you're always thinking about communicating your value for a specific opportunity, and there are three pieces there: being able to communicate, being able to identify your value, and always tailoring that to a specific opportunity. So we're going to be thinking about those three things as we move through this. So today, again, we're talking specifically about interviewing and professional dress. So from an interviewing standpoint, we're going to be moving through how you prepare for it, which is actually the majority of an interview. It actually happens mostly beforehand. The interview itself is often just about 20 minutes long. So some best practices and strategies. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about appropriate professional dress. So as I just mentioned, when you are getting ready to interview, one, be proud of yourself. If you've gotten to the interview stage, they like you, they've invited you in, so you should feel confident about that. And now you need to prepare. So that means starting and actually going backwards and looking at the job description, thinking about how the skills you have match what they are looking for. So again, that's thinking about this specific opportunity. Maybe do some research on the company or the organization, go to that website, talk to some other people who've worked there or have a connection there. Go on LinkedIn, do some background reading on the people who might be interviewing you. You want to know as much about that organization as you can. And that is both to prepare for the interview, but it's also for your own sake. You want to know that this is going to be a good match for you. Then you want to start anticipating some questions. And this is going to be both questions that they might have for you, and then we're next going to talk about questions that you might have for them. But starting with the questions they're going to have for you. Most interviews today are called behavioral interviews, which means they are looking at your past behavior to have a sense of how you might act or how you might be an employee for them going forward. So they're going to be asking you questions about situations where you might have dealt with a challenge or where you've taken on a leadership role. They will ask for examples or situations. They might present you with a possibility and ask you to think through how you would solve that or what you would do in that situation. So you can never know exactly what they'll ask you, but you can have a sense of what type of thing they might ask you. And there are some strategies for how to prepare for that. So as I said, likely questions are going to be about situations. And the way to answer it is by giving concrete examples and actions you took. So this is a strategy that I actually was given by an alum from our college who works in human resources. And she said, anytime you are answering a question, if you can think about a situation that you had, an action you took, and what the outcome was, that will give them a really concrete way of understanding how you contributed in that situation. So, for example, if they asked you, can you tell me about a time that you resolved conflict? You might think about a time, and it doesn't have to be in a work situation. It could be in your personal life. It could be at work. It could be in a club or on a team or some sort of community involvement, sometime where you've dealt with conflict. So you would give them an example of a situation. I was working as a server in my job at a restaurant, and a customer, complained about something. So then what's the action you took? I remained calm and professional and went to my manager and reported the situation. Then what was the outcome? So by answering in that way, you've just given a very clear answer. You can think about group projects you might have worked on, any situation that might be relevant. Next, you want to be thinking about questions that you might have for the interviewer, because the last question they are always going to ask you after you go through the interview is, do you have any questions for us? And this is where that background research is really going to help, because you might want to ask a question about something that the organization has done recently. Maybe they've been in the news. You could ask about what a typical day looks like. A great question is always to ask the interviewer what their motivation is to work at the company or the organization. It's that personal connection. So think through some different questions to have those prepared. And you always want to have at least 5, because during the interview, they may answer your questions. So then you get to this piece about, well, no matter how many questions I've prepared for, no matter how many examples I've thought of and you've written down all your possible answers, there's always things that might go wrong, right? It's always still unpredictable. And maybe you get anxious, maybe you get nervous. And I'm going to say here, if you get nervous, that's okay. It means you care about it. Right? Anyone that tells me they don't get nervous before an interview makes me a little bit worried. Maybe you should care a little bit more. Some people are naturally a little better at it. And over time, the more you practice, the more interviews you do, it will get more comfortable, but it's okay to be nervous. That said, there are some strategies that you can implement that are going to help you be more comfortable and that you can utilize during the interview. So 1, think about strategies to deal with anxiety and stress that you might use in a different situation. So if you listen to music before something, if you do breathing exercises, make sure you get a good night's sleep, go for a walk. Go ahead and use those to just calm yourself down ahead of time. Now, during the interview, smile, take a deep breath, sit up straight. You'll notice that if you can do those things, even just smiling, you'll actually breathe a little more and you'll calm yourself down, and it puts the interviewer at ease as well. Now, if you can't think of an answer to something, that's fine. Maybe say, well, that's a great question, and then try and talk through an answer. There really aren't always right or wrong answers in an interview. They're interested in seeing how you think through something, right? What your style is. We need all sorts of different employees. So one person might have a certain answer, someone else might have a different answer. They're looking at what your thought process is, what your style is, what your strengths are. So if you don't know the answer to something, feel free to talk out loud. Show them your thought process. If they give you a situation that you haven't encountered before, you can say, I can imagine a situation where I would do this. You can always ask if you can come back to a question. I'd be careful with that because then you have to make sure you come back and answer it. But these are all strategies you can use. Just remember that, again, the interview itself is a stressful situation and they're looking to see how you handle that situation. So if you can remain calm, if you can smile, if you can maintain eye contact, that will say a lot. So I just mentioned eye contact. So that leads into our nonverbals. Obviously, the content is really important. You do want to practice what you're going to say. Think through those examples that you might use. And at the same time, your confidence, your body language, those are all things that say just as much as the words. So we're going to be talking later about your appearance and what you might wear, but also be thinking about your posture, your eye contact, whether you're smiling, your facial expressions, the tone of your voice. Some of these things we may not realize how they're coming across. So you can practice by having someone else, do a Skype session, have someone sit across from you and give you feedback about that. Then there are some external considerations that you might also want to take into account. Again, appearance we'll be getting to. The interview structure. Are there going to be multiple people interviewing you? Maybe if it's an in-person interview, do you want to bring a portfolio to put your extra resume in, the questions you've prepared? If you're someone who takes notes, that's okay. Just let the interviewer know that you're going to be taking notes. And only do that if you can maintain eye contact. But a nice folder or portfolio is a good thing to bring. Again, if we're returning to possibly some in-person interviews, think about how long it'll take you to get there, weather, timing. So all these considerations. Now, I do want to talk briefly about virtual interviewing versus in-person interviewing, because really the majority of interviews in today's day and age are virtual and are likely to remain virtual. That really started after the recession, when employers realized that it's less expensive to do virtual interviewing, it's effective, it's flexible, and our technology is improving. So you may encounter some different types of virtual interviewing. It may be just video interviewing through Zoom or Skype or Google Hangouts, a platform like that. There are also pre-recorded interviews where you may be asked to record yourself and upload that to a system. So much of virtual interviewing is similar to in-person interviewing. The same things hold in terms of preparation, but in terms of the logistics, there are certain things you want to take into account. Your setting and the setup, what the lighting is like. You want to have light on your face, not coming from behind you. You want to make sure it's quiet and that you have a neutral background. Think about the computer height and angle. How is your sound on your computer? Do you have a backup headset and a charger? Think about with Zoom and many other platforms now, how the username shows up. That's sort of like wearing your name tag to the office. So think through some of these things before you go into the interview. And then finally, after all this preparation, you get to the interview itself. So again, interviewing is really about the preparation, and then you finally get to the day of the interview. So you always want to show up a little bit early, not too early, maybe just 5 minutes or so, and that goes for being online or in person. Obviously, dress professionally. Have other sounds turned off, so if it's virtual, other things on your computer, noises turned off, phones turned off. Don't move around, don't stand up, don't read from your notes. You can use references. The advantage of virtual interviewing is you can have references to the side on the table. You can have access to other things you might need. So that can be an advantage of virtual interviewing. But above all, whether it's in person or virtual, just stay calm if anything happens. And then after the interview, this is critical, always write a thank you within 12 hours, I would say. Now, because of how fast everything moves, I would use email. Write a thank you note to everyone that interviewed you, and it will really just set you apart. It can be a very short email saying thank you for the opportunity to interview, how much you appreciated it, and sign it off. If it's a position you absolutely care about, if you put a note in the mail, just a thank you card, that really might set you apart even more. And then do yourself the favor of doing a little self-reflection, thinking through how that interview went. Were there questions that surprised you or were challenging? Because every interview you do is practice for the next one. Hopefully it went well and will lead to a job offer or a secondary interview, but at the very least, it's given you practice to go further. So that's mostly covered interviewing, and obviously each situation is very unique and specific depending on the opportunity you're applying for in your personal situation, but that's an overview. As you saw in most of the sections, I mentioned appearance and professional dress, which is a component of interviewing and any other professional interaction. Could be networking and other events that you're involved in. So to go back to that original goal of communicating your value for this opportunity. So you're valuable, you have skills, you have experiences that you can contribute. They've never met you before, so they can't see that value unless you express it. So you're going to be communicating that verbally and through your body language in the interview. They've read it in your resume and your cover letter. But now through your appearance and your confidence, you can express that even more. So dress for success, which means stepping it up a notch, and be yourself, right? There are people that identify in different ways that, the traditional sort of what gets termed business casual or professional may not be what people feel best represents them. So be yourself, but the whole idea is that you don't want to wear anything that is going to distract from what you have to say. So for different terms that you might see, things like casual, business casual, and professional, these are sort of levels of professionalism or, how dressy they are. So if you were invited to a networking event or an interview and it gave you an indication that it could be casual dress, this generally means, no shorts, but you could wear jeans or khakis or, a dress, something casual, but you don't need to wear a suit. Business casual notches it up a little bit. So an outfit that's put together a little bit more, but you don't need to wear a suit and tie. And then finally, professional is really at the top level. This is for a serious interview, a serious networking event, something that is at the most significant level. Most interviews, I would recommend something like a blazer for anyone is a good default. It's neutral. It's a color that doesn't distract. So a blazer and a shirt underneath. If you are someone that tends to fiddle with things, jewelry or watches, be aware of that and maybe don't use those. So think about solid colors that, again, don't make you stand out in a way that you don't want to stand out. You want to set yourself apart because of your experiences and what you have to say. So again, this is just a visual that kind of gives you a description of some of these terms. That said, within it, everyone's going to have some specific ideas of what might work or not. Bottom line, There is never anything wrong with being overdressed. In an interview, you want to be the best dressed person in the room. It shows respect for the situation. And it can kind of give you a sense of confidence. It's almost like a suit of armor. You're going in and you're going into that situation and you have that confidence because you've put on those nice clothes. If you underdress, if you wear something that isn't nice enough, that's, it's going to show a disrespect for the position. So that's an overview of how to interview and professional dress for when you are applying to an opportunity. And we're going to leave it there.